make it successful.
And
Yeah.
we are live.
So, so what's the point of 30 or 300 some million dollars to save a sea lion?
Is this per year?
Well,
How long would
well, it was predicted that it would need like 50 years to recover with all this money.
$380 million in 50 years?
Right.
For 50 years,
Yeah, so it's like, at what point do we go, wait a minute, that's enough, let this thing die off?
I mean, what is it doing for the ecosystem?
Can't say. I mean, and that's part of the issue, is that we don't really know all the details of like life cycles and ecosystems and different things that
About
may or may not
about
be.
that, what that sea lion is doing for the ecosystem.
I don't know. I'm sure it's eating some fish, but
Well, what are the abstract principles that we want to kind of clarify here? Because I'm not sure any of us, have the technical wherewithal to explore at which point in the relationship of economic cost and benefit.
right. So yeah, I was kind of leaning towards more something having intrinsic value to exist.
Yeah.
For me, I have an issue with pandas. It's like, yeah, they might be cute or whatever, but in and of themselves, what value do they have?
Right. So, my position.
Yeah, and I see. Here for some sugary goodness.
Already had mine.
Slightly dampened. Yeah, same here. We had a funeral today and they had an amazing spread. Kind of.
That's where the best sweets are at funerals.
It is true. They throw you the best party when you know you can't be there. They had like an entire 12-foot table and nothing but desserts.
Well, I think that's probably has something to do with people being sad and wanting sweets or something.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
they'll need a sugar crash in 2 hours. That's,
Yeah.
that's what we guaranteed them.
Comfort food. Yeah, that's not my go-to comfort food. They had shrimp cocktail and that was kind of what I lived up on.
Those are nice. Yeah. I like
Yeah.
those.
It was solid. I felt a little bad enjoying myself that much at a funeral, but.
Well, when you got that much dessert and shrimp cocktails,
You don't want to go to waste.
Well, yeah, and it was a bunch of elderly. I would say we were probably the youngest there, and they'll get one shrimp and a tiny little dab of sauce, and then how much can I take? So I waited till they went all through, and then of course there's a ton left over. So then I feel okay grabbing a dozen.
Yeah.
It's that game of when do you grab more?
Yeah. Ever the question. Yes.
I'm glad you guys survived the snow apocalypse somehow.
Oh man.
Yeah,
It
we
was
were
a
just
very-
talking about how disappointing it
I
was.
walked barefoot through it. That's how I survived.
Rebuild.
In Albany, it wasn't very snowpocalypse-ish.
No, it wasn't anywhere. I know. I haven't even checked to see what it was like at Trout Lake, but
At Trout Lake, it was really bad.
it was okay.
So
I want to feel justified that we made the right decision, but
Well, no matter if you feel justified or not, some of us will never forgive you.
Well, I think we all agree that Carmen has no business driving. I saw one of her Facebook posts.
Clearly.
It's like, yeah, she has no business driving, so she can't rent a car and anything like that. Gotta be real careful.
well, there's that one hill that that's what we're coming out of the gorge there. That's one I was worried. I get to see people sliding back down.
Yeah.
Blame Craig. I was ready to go.
It's fine. So we're talking about justification for saving or not saving other species besides our own.
Oh,
Or what point is it
Endangered.
too much
Yeah.
for us to?
what are our obligations to the animal kingdom?
I don't know. Mike could
Yeah.
help you refine it a little more.
For now, we've kind of put, the intrinsic value of the species.
Mm.
Does it have value in and of itself? Or do we place the value on it and therefore we need to save it?
Is it delicious?
Well, and that's,
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
That's value though.
right.
And cows are really delicious.
They are
Yeah.
amazing.
They would not be nearly as populous if we didn't like the way they tasted.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, I do think that as conscious creatures, right, with a capacity to understand suffering and the alleviation of suffering,
Mhm.
I think with that comes a certain amount of responsibility. I wouldn't go so far as to say obligation.
Yeah.
I think that there's a responsibility to recognize our position as effectively the shepherds of the planet, right?
Yeah.
And that we should, for all intents and purposes, try to care for the other other conscious creatures. That being said, I think that as the de facto powerhouse of the planet, the shepherds of this planet, we also have to recognize where we are.
Mhm.
We're on a small rock hurtling towards a giant ball of fire that's running away from us, right? Flying through empty space. So we need a backup plan beyond this planet, in my mind, right? If we don't have an answer to life existing elsewhere, right, which requires what? Coordinated capital effort, right? A complex network of things coming together to produce a capacity to live off of the planet. And you don't get that by investing all of your resources in the protection of animals. And they're not really helping us with the whole getting off the planet thing, unless the dolphins have been up to something. I just don't see them doing that. They're little flippers.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't want to, denigrate the position of these animals and
Mhm.
the conscious, the state of them. I just think that the actual situation that we're in as an organism, species, negates the objective responsibility that we do have to take care of them.
Yeah.
We should not in any way take away from our ability to make sure that all life can survive elsewhere, right?
Mhm.
Beyond this planet. We should not have that subservient to the idea that the alleviation of squirrel suffering,
Yeah.
shouldn't be more important than that.
So what about the argument that like they were here first? I know we've talked about this before. It's sort of illogical, but
Yeah.
there is a pretty intense emotional attachment to, well, is it really our planet, or did we just, or don't they have rights because they existed before us? Do we have any rights
What do you mean
to?
before us? What is this before? How do they? How? What do you mean before?
I don't know.
What are you talking about from a purely Darwinian evolutionary perspective, that we are the highest species to evolve, so technically they are our ancestors and were before us, the capacity? I mean, scientifically, there's a lot of flaws to that argument as well.
I mean, alligators have been here before we were even. I don't know.
What does before mean? Like, and I mean, to your point, right? Like,
I don't know. Wherever you draw the line between Homo sapien and Neanderthal, or whatever it is now currently.
So, like,
I don't know.
the evolution,
Consciousness.
Evolution doesn't stop, right? It keeps going, right? Alligator, right, hasn't changed much.
Mhm.
There was something that looked very much like an alligator, 100 million years ago, right? It was bigger or it was smaller. It had a funny looking snout, but it was basically an alligator.
The
right?
crocodiles have hardly changed at all.
Right, exactly. I mean, they've hardly changed, but they have changed, right? And, with every birthing of new generation, there is small change, right? That's evolution. So, like, we've all been here the equal amount of time as far as life on this planet, because we're all part of the life system on the planet. So, like, yeah, we happen to be the newest and craziest ape on the planet running around, and we seem to be in charge of everything because we can adapt faster than anything else.
And we can have tools.
Yeah, thumbs, killer.
Well, and that gets back to the idea of,
We need your
well,
thumbs and prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
well, for one thing, could you then say that, so whoever your elder generation is, or even if it wasn't, your ancestor, your parent or whoever, if somebody was born a minute before you, they've already say, I was here first.
Yeah.
Like
So, I
when
mean,
it's a twin, right? Like a twin that was born.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you get it, or,
Bragging
or
rights
is it when you were birthed or when you were conceived?
Yeah. So
You know,
then,
so-
like,
I'm not saying the
so
argument
then-
makes any sense. I'm just saying that a
Yeah.
large number of the population has this emotional attachment to nature because it's bigger than us and has
Yeah.
existed before maybe us as individuals. So there's like this weird, we should protect it because it was here first. I don't know. When you break it down logically, it doesn't make sense, but that's not the point.
Yeah, I get.
What
I
I'm
get
saying
your
is like
point, and-
ecologists and people are like, we should respect it because it's bigger than us. I
Also, the
guess.
ecosystems are important.
We are a part of the ecosystem.
Right.
We are
Yeah.
part of the bigger thing that they're looking at.
So if we're version 10.0, how much should we care about version 1?
Well, and using that analogy, so the question here is the idea of human exceptionalism. So from a, your I guess, meta-narrative, the worldview aside of our origins, any sort of theological concepts, again, just purely from a scientific perspective, I think that it's fair you can logically look and recognize in some idea the capacity of human exceptionalism that.
Science can't do that, but I mean, I take
Well,
vaguely where you're pointing.
yeah, just from so in other words, rather than saying, okay, we are, a iPhone 5, the closest relative in the animal kingdom is an iPhone 4S, essentially the same, just a few minor, greater functions. When in reality, I think I would make the case that you would say we are an iPhone 5 and the animal kingdom is toaster. I mean, they have some of the same basic components and parts, but functionality wise, it's an entire different level of function. It's not just a slightly better version of
I wonder
essentially
if
the same
that's
thing.
just because we have consciousness that we are aware of, and we haven't yet discovered that to exist in an animal.
Sentience?
Well, I mean, you see smaller levels of it.
Self-awareness to the degree. I mean, so as far as we know,
Well, so
snakes are not
chimpanzees-
contemplating the realities of the universe.
What it means to be a snake. Yeah.
Chimpanzees are using some kind of sticks as tools.
I think a lot of it comes down to being a social animal,
Mhm.
because you develop different brain regions when you're a social animal. And then object permanence is something that other animals can have, right? They understand that when the phone goes behind the piece of paper, that the phone still exists, right? Like a baby can't recognize that. That's why peekaboo works.
Until about 2 or 3,
Right.
humans even. Really
And then
grasp
they
that.
develop that, and that's that idea of, not that idea, but the cognitive framework inside of the mind that allows for object permanence
Mhm.
is a projection of continuity, right? And this is why we like geometry and we like buildings that are shaped a specific way, that are
Mhm.
really easy to understand shapes, because then we can project the whole building and you can feel the size of the whole building based on this idea of projected reality, right?
Yeah.
And then that's a really basal part of the brain. What comes after that is social learning, right? And then so you start recognizing people, and you start recognizing the patterns of people, and then you start projecting patterns of people, and then you start recognizing the self, and you start projecting patterns of self, and you start imagining future contents, right?
Based on the patterns we see now, this is what will happen.
And those are all higher order cognitive processes
Like one
that
of
take
the
time to
basic
develop.
arguments.
And so like the self in temporality is not something that a lot of creatures have in gobs like humans do.
Right. That was also somebody like Locke was used that as a description as to like how we can develop a sense of identity because we have the continuation from when we wake up and when we go to sleep and wake up, we have a continuation of identity. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense without anyway, I feel like that's completely off topic.
No, it's the narrative self, right?
Right.
You have this image of self that's constantly running, right? It's just a piece of your brain. It's the self-referential part.
But I guess
That's
of-
separate.
it's the self as other that you remember,
Yes.
right?
And that's the key, and that's the distinction between the animal kingdom has a capacity to do some level of reasoning.
Yeah.
But again, I would make the case that it's not just we have gotten slightly better at it, it's a completely different category altogether that humanity has a capacity to contemplate the why,
Yeah.
the meta-narrative.
Yeah.
That you see no traces of that, at least so
Yeah.
far whatsoever in the animal kingdom.
So then does that, I guess, necessitate us using that ability that we're on a different plane?
Yeah.
Should we then basically say, well, it's about our survival first and foremost and contemplate our future to the exclusion of all the other ones and just like whatever happens, or do we or are we supposed to be self-critical enough to be like, well, we shouldn't completely destroy everything for our own gain, we should save something? I mean, I think that's and then because we've already decided that that's what we're going to do, honestly, like governments and stuff, we have this list of endangered species and all these types of things that are going to go extinct for whatever reason, and so then we choose to protect
Smallpox is an
those.
endangered species of virus, we made it go extinct.
No,
Or
it's
virus.
still on Madagascar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But we're trying to make it go extinct.
Freaking
Eagles
animals.
are making it come back.
Black plague, bubonic plague.
Oh, black plague,
That's-
yes.
Yeah.
Smallpox might be.
We were
But like, what
Yeah.
if we had let the American eagle? I mean, the bald eagle.
Go
The bald
American
eagle. Why, what if we
Non-American
had
eagle,
what if
yeah,
we
buy
had
my
made the bald eagle go extinct?
Then maybe we could finally fulfill Benjamin Franklin's dream
Oh,
of
yeah,
having
the
the turkey as our national bird.
Much more practical.
It's also from here, it's great.
Well, what value does the bald eagle have to her life?
I mean,
Okay,
Well,
do
that
not
could pretty-
insult America
No,
like
I'm not.
that
I'm
here.
not. I'm just.
it's pretty from certain angles.
It is.
The bald eagle.
So it has aesthetic value.
It's definitely
it
not.
brings benefit.
Pretty face on.
So
Birds are just weird.
well, that gets to the question too of. So you can. Some people say, okay, for survival, for
Now,
example.
bald
the
eagles are,
consumption-
with the help of humans, bald eagles are flying around all over the place.
They are. I don't even think they're hurting anymore. Like the whales. I think the whales are doing fine now.
Is that right?
I
We should start eating them again.
we should start it.
I
Yeah.
would love to eat a whale.
Yeah. They do in Japan. But the point is that so some people would say, okay, we understand you have to consume animals, you have to in some way harm the animal kingdom in order for your own survival. I mean, even if
But that's not unique to humans.
no, and that's
I mean,
the point.
other
but-
animals are brutal.
oh yeah, you look at the ruthlessness
I mean,
of
we're
the animal
not
kingdom in the
really.
suffering.
Like bald eagles.
I mean,
So
watched a bird
the question is, they would say,
Disgusting.
what's survival and what is indulgence and excess? So basically, I'd say I'm allowed to consume the bare amount of calories I need every day just for essential survival, or am I allowed to eat a double or triple cheeseburger just because I enjoy it and it makes me happy? You know, I didn't need to eat that much beef. We could have saved a cow, but is there you're allowed a certain amount of just pleasure or enjoyment? You know, foie gras. If I want to go eat foie gras, you know, am I allowed to put aside the fact that a goose is brutally force-fed to fatten its liver so that I can enjoy this $30 delicacy? And that's like, where do you draw the line? And is your hand steady enough to draw that line? At what point you go into decadence or just bare survival? I think as humans, we recognize there's value in enjoyment, in appreciating pleasures of the world with proper perspective. Now, that doesn't necessarily equate to true hedonism. I think that's a different
I
category.
think what the issue, I don't really know, because that seems really subjective and it's probably
Sure.
just a matter of personal opinion. But
Again, where are you going
I
to
It's
get
relative, yeah.
really annoyed though about people who want to protect animals, and then they have that protection of these animals that doesn't really contribute anything to me because I'm never going to interact with this animal, and it actually starts to go the other direction and it impedes my life or whatever in some way.
Well, the thing is saving, and some might say, saving certain animals is too costly in other ways for
No.
humans, or maybe because of some other animal might, have more trouble that because you weren't spending on saving this other animal that was more useful, and it might go extinct or something. It's like the point is we can't save all the different species, so we kind of have to choose our battles about which one we're gonna.
Well, and then also the unintended consequences that come about from trying to save an animal. Like, I don't know, a completely anecdotal example would be the spotted owl or whatever
Yeah.
from Oregon forests. And so there's this huge, big ecological push to not do any more like logging and to just leave the forests alone. And then like several generations later of this, now like unkept, unmanaged forestry exists, and then one wildfire, like 300,000 acres over the summer, a couple of summers ago, and like you just destroy everything, and like so many other things go wrong because you tried to protect one species.
Because it was a cute animal.
Well,
Because
I
I
don't-
want to protect the
Pretty
animals.
cute.
What
Yeah,
was
it
the
is.
spotted
It is
owl?
pretty cute.
Was it worth
What?
that? I'm not saying it's a direct,
Well, there's ways
cause
to
and effect, but
to
it's a
manage
bigger
keep the
thing.
forest the way it was for the spotted
well, it's
owl.
better to
But
manage
just
the
by-
forest than to leave
by
it
just
alone.
cleaning
Because
some brush and stuff.
it's gonna burn if you don't manage
there's
it.
one
It's-
more thing with the spotted owl is a different type of owl has kind of moved in and is taking over because it's better able to adapt to the environment, and so its population is growing, crowding out the spotted owl.
So despite our best efforts,
It's still kind of on its way out.
And also besides that, when a bunch of those forests burned down, probably killed a lot of spotted owls.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to think that we are the cure-all for everything, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if maybe we should not think of ourselves so highly and just not get in the way. I mean, maybe we shouldn't intentionally kill all the whales, you know?
Probably not a good idea.
Maybe we shouldn't intentionally just kill all the rhinos and only harvest their
Those guys
horns
are assholes.
because
The rhino, yeah, they're kind of like hippos.
Yeah, just like hippos.
I guess
Hippos are
hippos are
massive
actually really
Scene.
like kill more people than
Oh
like
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, they're brutal.
Are they the deadliest animal? They're
Well,
one of the.
they're one of them.
mosquitoes are.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Mosquitoes kill every
deli
more than
snake.
anything else, but I don't know if mosquitoes are animals.
Well, that's the virus.
Should we protect mosquitoes?
No.
do mosquitoes have any intrinsic rights whatsoever?
Here's the thing: they don't need.
No.
They don't need. I don't know if they.
They don't need our protection.
I don't.
Other than to clone dinosaurs.
But if we try to protect them, then maybe we'll destroy them. or something.
I'm totally for the mammalian kingdom, so all other kingdoms are beneath us. So I'm gonna be a total
But what I'm
species
saying
here.
is, there doesn't
Rep-
seem to
reptiles
be
and
a
insects
reason
down the
why the mosquitoes would be in danger at this point that we can think of, that we can foresee, and also, I don't know why we would want to save them anyway unless they were doing something for the.
I don't really know
What
what they
have you done from the
contribute.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, and that's-
they feed they feed bats,
So again, it comes down to benefit.
but I don't think the bats are going to starve to death. If mosquitoes
but, you
go
know, do we have a short-sighted view of what benefits us versus, hey, so we've killed off all the mosquitoes, but, we really needed them to do this thing, and now that that's gone, and then
We
we're
just
gonna
haven't
die off.
discovered.
Actually,
Yeah.
in the Willamette Valley, mosquitoes were a huge problem for a long time, and then they started using a certain chemical to kill them, like spray them.
DDT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it started affecting the fish,
Mhm.
and then it started affecting the birds. It's like birds are getting diseases from this spray that was
Mhm.
like harmless to them, killed mosquitoes, but then the fish were affected and carried it, and then like birds
The
started
birds ate
dying.
the fish.
They made the eggs thin.
Yeah, the eggshells got
Darn
thin, so
food
they-
chain.
It's almost like they're all connected or something.
It is weird.
It's like
crazy.
an ecosystem or
Well,
something.
and that gets back to the argument that it does indirectly benefit us, so having species survive and maintain the status
Another
quo.
thing-
But well, I would say from a purely naturalistic standpoint, the problem with
Stop.
that is you're assuming the status quo is good. What if by random chance the status quo got screwed up and we could actually have a better status quo? They say, well, this species is here, so it's here for a reason. Well, again, if it's all ground up, I would
And what
say
about
that
the-
how do we know it's a good reason?
And then there's
I don't
also
know.
the whole
It won't be better without them.
there's the whole topic of invasive species as well.
No.
Yeah. What is what?
Like
what
Scott's,
yeah. What is invasive, right?
Like
it
the
doesn't
bird-
belong here, so get it out.
What does belong?
It's
right?
my land. I get to decide what I plant.
Yeah,
I was here first.
I wanna
It
know
always goes
what-
back to the "I was here first" thing.
I want to know what protection looks like. Let's have a
Invasive
hypo-
species, like for example,
Bill-
Hold
star.
on. Let's have a hypothetical, right? Limitless funds, right? Limitless capital investment. What does protection actually look like? And then how do we see protection affecting these ecosystems?
Have you seen Captain America: The Winter Soldier?
Yeah.
Like, they had the giant gun that was run by a supercomputer that could like track DNA, and then as soon as anybody had ill intent, they could just snipe them out of the air.
I don't
Like-
remember very well.
That sounds like a horrific concept.
No, it sounds like protection, right? Anytime anybody looks like they're gonna do something wrong, there's a giant missile up above that can kill you.
Who
with a
defines
laser.
wrong?
I mean,
Well, there was a
protection. I
giant
don't know if
That sounds like protection. To
I don't
me.
know how protected I feel
protecting-
with a gun pointed at my head all the time.
Well, that was Captain America's whole thing. It's like you don't protect people by holding a gun to their head.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that's the American
I
way.
guess
of
maybe I'm
protection.
going to see Winter Soldier again. I didn't think too much of that movie the first time I saw it. In any case,
I
what
like the premise.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but with the best intentions you can
Yeah.
imagine, how do we protect these animals? What does it look like? And then how do you ethically justify that? Because whatever it is you do, if you artificially maintain a perfectly balanced environment, life is going to push the boundaries of that. It's right. It always finds a way, and it's going to fall apart. And
Quote Jurassic
it's still it's artificial, right? Because you've created artificial boundaries, right?
Or the second somebody said the second you observe something, you change it. There's no such thing as completely neutral interaction. The second you
Right.
even observe or interact with anything, you in some way altered its environment.
Absolutely.
So the idea of people like alive,
Yeah.
and just go,
Because
and
they don't
look,
give a
he's
crap.
being ridiculously stupid. And they're like, dude, this is not smart. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting eaten.
Yeah.
But this idea of are we meant to interact in that capacity? You know, or so even by trying to protect
Yeah.
something, are we actually causing it harm because we're artificially interfering, or do we truly just sit back?
See, I just can't reconcile artificial.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. The idea of artificial is itself an artifice,
Yeah.
right? We've created this idea, but it's not separate, right? We are part of nature. This couch was invented naturally.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just discussing, or I heard Sam Harris talking. Was it Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson? I can't remember. Somebody was talking about how. No, it was both of them. It was during a debate. Basically, that you can't say that like humans and their technology are separate
Right.
things because we develop. It's just like the bear's fur or the snake's venom or what. It's a development of nature and stuff like that. And like you can say that like, well, apart from our technology and our tools, we're so far down on the animal kingdom. It's like, but no, that's part of our brain and our development, and so
Yeah.
our technology goes with us.
This
Like
facility is the tip of my spear.
Yeah.
so, it was an interesting concept
I'll
to
take
me.
thermonuclear weapons over your sharp teeth, Mr. Bear.
Hell yeah.
So that's an interesting point of so I would think people would try to say, well, artificial is anything that doesn't happen by natural chance. There isn't a mind behind it. So if you suppose there's no mind behind the universe or existence and creation, everything that happens to come into being through random chance, they would say is not artificial. Anything that
I think man-made just means artificial.
well, yeah, and that's the thing with it. It's because you wouldn't say beaver bait. You wouldn't say it's beaver dam is artificial.
I would.
But you would
Yeah.
just to mess with beavers.
Yep.
Just to be in
Yeah.
like in spite of your.
You would say a
It's
bird
te-
nest
it's a
is
technological
artificial.
advancement from beavers.
Yes.
Right? And like a chimp sticking a stick into an ant. That's a tool.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
That
could
is
almost
artifice.
you could almost make the argument that artificial means made with intent from some sort of mind, because a beaver uses its tools, its mind, and its ability, its instincts to make a thing, but just random twigs falling into the river wouldn't make that.
I think linguistically you can make that point, but I don't think that that's how it happens developmentally, right? Because what happens is your mind projects purpose onto an object, right? It projects tool-like abilities, right? Like, I see this and I see, thing to write with. I don't see white, orange, straight thing that has
Yeah.
coming out of it. Pen, right? I see
In terms of
capacities, right?
functionality.
It has a function, yeah. And so you see function first, and then you render the rest of the object.
Well, to that point, even if it is something that is naturally occurring, because the monkey just picks up a stick, but he uses it for a particular purpose. So is that stick, even though it happened by random natural chance in the natural world, is it artificial as soon as he starts using it for something? He sees a purpose in it. Because literally his
stick
tools.
itself.
He starts using it for kind of how he was using it for termite straws. Like,
Yeah.
hollowed it out.
Yeah.
Was that its intended purpose?
I think that goes
Wind
back to
blew
what
over.
Danny's saying is, how do you separate that from the ape? How do you separate that from us? So, it's like taking our nature away from us and calling it something else.
Is that tool an extension of the ape?
Well,
I think it has to be. Right?
yeah,
And because I can't not see all of it as the same thing, right? To separate mankind from nature, right? It's a false dichotomy, right? And then you have to have language to approach the relationship, but you still have to recognize that we are part of the system. So anything that we do, whatever decision it is that we're making, it is. Yeah, even the people who are not a part of the system, by that definition, they are within the system, that kind of unit.
Yeah.
Right? So you never escape. You can't get out.
Within the broader system.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and kind of bringing us back full circle. Again, I think we all agree we can't draw a magic line and say we have this much obligation to this part of the animal kingdom and not. It's always kind of in the eye of the beholder.
Have you guys
There's
seen the,
no way by which we can escape that?
PETA billboard,
I've seen a lot of crazy PETA billboards. There's
the one where it has all the animals lined up, and says pet or food. Where do you draw the
yeah.
line?
Again, how cute are they? How
And then you
delicious
just-
are they? It's the
Right
spectrum.
between horse and cow. It's like right about there.
If you're this delicious, you got to be this cute, or we're gonna eat you.
Yeah.
Cows
again,
aren't
that's-
cute enough, and they're really delicious.
that's a cultural perspective.
I
Yeah.
think cows are
Dogs
really
and
weird.
cats were food in different
They're
countries.
cute, but they're not cute enough for how delicious they are. Is what I'm
People
saying.
eat horses.
I'll eat anything. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's probably easier. It's easier to eat something that's less cute. It's easier for some people. That's why people are pescatarians, even vegetarians. My ex was vegan, but she still ate fish, and part of it was just doesn't view fish as soulless creatures, you would say, or in the same capacity because they're not cute. They're slimy and they live in a river. And And so it's not the same as, you know, seeing cows herded into a pen for
I
and
think
just
you
let
can
the slaughter.
call yourself vegan and eat fish.
I
You have
don't.
to be pescatarian.
Yeah, that's what you would say.
That's what it's called.
But like we were
I'm
watching,
vegan except to eat fish on pescatarian. I mean,
like my wife was watching a show the other night, like Northwoods Law, I think it is. It's about the game wardens in the Northeast, and they had a boat of like 10 game wardens that were tracking lobster traps off the coast of New Hampshire, and they're pulling them up, checking to see if their knot was loose enough so that a whale, if it got snagged, could escape. And I just remember thinking, like, they're spending hundreds or thousands of hours every year checking these traps, and the off chance that one will have a knot that's not quite tight enough, so that a whale that may or may not, in, you know, 1,000,000 to 1 chance, gets snagged in their escape. And to your point, I'm thinking, how many thousands and thousands of taxpayer dollars or hundreds of thousands are being spent for that? I got nothing against whales. I don't want to just say, hey, screw you, whale, just for kicks and giggles. But you have to weigh that of, okay, if you're spending X amount of dollars to potentially save one whale a year, is it less moral than saying, what could we do for humanity?
Yeah. In that one instance, right, like, I think it would be smarter to just have one dude with like a kick-ass piece of sonar equipment just kind of tooling around, so when that one whale starts choking on the lobster thing, he'll just go kill that and we'll eat that whale. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
And the
nothing's
lobster's less of the
wasted.
deep.
so I want to know
That's
where
my
where's
Yeah.
the morality, the morality, virtue, and signal about protecting animals. Where did that come from? Why in our
Cuteness.
culture?
It had to be cuteness.
Why is it moral? Why is it the moral high ground to
I think
value animal life so highly? Why are you immoral if you don't value it as high as other people? Like these environmentalists.
attachment. I mean, to me, pandas are pointless, useless. So why are we saving pandas? What are they
They're
doing?
not even that like kind. They're
No,
really
No.
they're
kind of, like,
stupid. They can't reproduce very well.
territorial.
They eat.
Do they have a right to survive? They
Bamboo.
can't, they can reproduce that.
It was like a bear that got lost.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened.
It's just
Something
got
strange
geographically
happened,
located.
yeah, it's like-
located.
Yeah.
Or because something is low, because there's not a lot of them left, we think we have an obligation. It's like, well, yeah, there's not a lot left for a reason. Is it bad? Are we worse off?
That was always,
Well,
that's
but
always
going
been my
back-
thought.
Just something that Jake was saying about what does protection look like? It
Yeah.
would be, so if the panda only exists in a certain area, then you have to extract everything out of that area that affects the panda. So you've got to remove millions of people from the panda
Mhm.
area. So where do you put these people?
Yep.
How do you take care of these people? How do you feed
And
these people?
is that a natural environment you've created?
Yeah, after you've left.
Is it?
I remember
That's
when
natural?
I was in 29
Don't know.
Palms. We
Remove
were
things that affect the panda.
Yeah.
doing aircraft ordnance
Sounds like a
testing
really boring room.
out in the desert.
Right?
And we had to stop testing. We had to stop dropping bombs in the desert because there's a tortoise,
Yeah.
protected tortoise. So we were it was federally illegal to do any ordnance testing in the desert there after the certain period of time because there's a more likelihood that we'll kill a tortoise.
So in.
So we had to stop all of our training, which is why we were there, and leave because of a tortoise.
So there, I forget where, but
I guess that's
some
protection.
desert area, they set up these grids of solar panels. Well, it started to affect a tortoise or a little turtle, whatever. And so the idea was, well, we'll just take these creatures and put them somewhere else. Which, so they
That's
do
a
that.
terrible idea.
And the tortoises died off anyway because they were taken from an environment that they knew
And we're suited for.
into a different environment, even though they might have been suited for it. They didn't know where to go to find the things that they needed. So in our
Our infinite wisdom.
yeah, you know, our need to create renewable power to, I don't know, what, to not burn some coal and do this, we kind of, well, here's a different problem you're creating.
I gotta head out, but I think, you know,
Yeah.
my position on it is like, you know, we should definitely care about suffering of
Mhm.
other animals. And I think that that comes from the realization that we are animals, we're part of the system. Whether you find that through, you know, spiritual contemplation or, you know, psychedelic mishaps. You know, you come
Or
to this
both.
realization that we're all, you know, we're all here and in this together.
Yeah.
We can suffer, and we can see suffering in other animals. And it's suffering of a different kind than our own, I think we must admit, but it is still suffering. So I think that the unnecessary suffering is something that has to be limited,
Mhm.
definitely. But I think that we need to recognize suffering long-term, right? The big suffering,
Mhm.
capital S suffering, right? If we can't find a way to sustain human civilization, right? And if we can't find a way to get along at the human level, we will never find a way to get along and be productive on the whole ecosystem level.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is the Anthropocene, right? We live in an era affected and defined by the motions of human beings on the planet. So we are responsible for this, whatever happens,
Yeah.
obviously. But we also need to be aware that with that responsibility comes the hard choice of allowing suffering now to alleviate greater suffering later. And I don't think that we can always know what the right answer is, right? So it just takes a lot of conversations like these
Yeah.
to figure that out.
Many more.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That game never ends.
I feel like empathy. You were talking, I started thinking about empathy. I feel like we form like
take it
empathetic
easy.
relationships.
Take care, Jake.
See you later, Jake.
Or next week's President's Day.
Next week
2
is
weeks.
President's Day.
2 weeks.
Yeah. One fortnight.
wait.
1 fortnight. In a fortnight, I'll see you gentlemen.
Yeah.
Sounds bueno.
All right,
All right, enjoy the rain. Best you can.
walk
Yeah.
barefoot in it. Empathy.
Well, the thing
big
is,
thing.
like,
we
with
form like these relationships.
yeah, but empathy implies the ability to essentially put yourself in the shoes of someone else. So we have so much less in common with the animal kingdom, with humanity. We have such a lesser degree to empathize with them because we are so much more unlike them than we are with other humans.
Well, I don't think emotionally we think that though. I think it's like, oh no, the dog is dying. This is
Yeah, but again,
terrible.
you don't
like,
say that about a wasp because they're annoying and they seem to serve no practical purpose and benefit us in no way.
But
Like, screw you, wasp. I
if
don't
you
care.
were like watching a ladybug and then somebody comes and just steps on it, and you're like, oh no, kill the ladybug. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe cuteness has something to do with it.
Well, if it's us or if it's,
I don't think it's
if
utility,
danger, wasp. If I see a wasp and my children are playing in the yard, it's an element of danger.
Well,
Like when you see the wasp and your children are playing in the yard, instead of saying, "Oh, let's move the wasp out of the way," you're thinking, "Kill it, kill it."
well, at that point, like,
I mean, I have no problem. Like wasps are just
yeah,
the devil.
they are, yeah. Or like if there's a spider in the house, like I will try if it's reasonable to just grab it and throw it outside, but I'm not gonna break my back. I'm not gonna go necessarily out of my way. If it's like high up on a ceiling, the only thing I can do is smash it. Okay. If it's laying on the ground and I can capture it and toss it out, I'll do it.
Well,
I try to make some consideration, but the question is, are you expected to unnecessarily and needlessly burden yourself? And that comes down to the idea of what are we entitled to? What degree of pleasure or convenience are we entitled to?
Well, also like, do we have a right to end life?
Well, if you're a Jane, you would say no. That's why you eventually have to get to the point where you starve yourself to death because you haven't done anything to, you're reincarnated enough to reach the highest level of existence where you starve yourself to death and have caused no suffering of any living thing.
other than breathing in the microbes and.
Well, they wear
stuff.
cloth over their mouths, they don't accidentally breathe in bugs.
But then you've harmed animals and plants and stuff by creating your clothes and your cloth and.
Again, we tried to kill smallpox, pretty much did it, couldn't
Yeah.
lab. That's
So-
poor sad virus.
Yeah, with vector spiders is, so my daughter, she likes to save these, and so we'll, all the brown recluse or little spiders, whatever. And she'll say, well, I just took it outside, and it's like, well, that particular type of spider prefers inside. It's a
It's
house,
almost poisonous.
it's a house spider.
Yeah.
So just putting it outside doesn't fix anything, because she says, yeah, it came back in. It's like, because that's its environment.
Yeah.
So if you're taking the spider out of its environment, are you doing it harm, any more or less harm than if you just squashed it?
Yeah,
So
it's
you-
just, it is interesting because there's this sort of, it's almost irrational, but like this accusational, like what right do you have to kill a bug or kill an animal or whatever? Like, its life is not any more less valuable than yours.
Well, from a moral perspective, we went over this again multiple times, but if you believe in nothing but random chance and pure unguided evolutionary process, then there is no morality and nothing's right, nothing's wrong. So it's whatever you feel. You know, so that I do find that a little bit funny when pure naturalists try to make some sort of moral argument, but yet they appeal. There's no grand says who, so they have nothing to appeal to other than I don't like it. Well, I don't like you, so
Yeah.
you know, you can make that argument. I mean, you could say, well, there's an innate sense. Where does that innate sense come from? Because, yeah, I mean, when we see needless suffering, like Jessica, there was a hornet in our house a couple months ago, and Jessica got it in the vacuum. She thought, okay, the vacuum will tear it to pieces, it'll die quickly. Well, it survived and was inside the tank there, like covered in dust and dirt and just like fighting for its life. And it was like, it's this hornet. I don't care about it. Like I said, it serves no practical purpose. And I have no problem stepping on it. But yet seeing it there fighting for its life in dust and dirt and muck, yeah, it was like, that sucks. So how can we end its suffering quicker? Even though I would say I have no necessarily moral obligation to that hornet because it's a hornet, there is a sense of I don't want to needlessly cause suffering if I can.
I feel like that only comes
Eliminate
about
suffering.
because you have the ability to empathize with something
Yeah.
beyond yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know
we
if that
know
empathy is.
if it was suffering or not. It was just, okay, here,
Do
I
wasps
presumed it was suffering.
suffer, or does it just is
Does
the
it feel pain like you do?
the appearance of struggle
Yeah,
just seem like suffering to us?
that's true.
Because maybe wasps and insects don't have the capacity to feel like we do, and so it's just another
It's a
day for them.
masochist wasp.
I
and it
mean,
was
what?
doing it.
How do you know like
Well,
every
well,
day
here's
is
the-
not
here's the thing
suffering?
is-
maybe it was just having the same struggle just within your house, and now it's just in a smaller container with the
That's
same
true.
struggle.
I mean, if
Yeah,
they
it's
get
not
fuzzy.
eaten
Well,
whole,
That's
they
like,
probably struggle
for
for a
example,
while.
but I think we think that fluffy animals like cats their suffering is bad.
Well, yeah, because there's an innate sense we can relate to them, and there's chemical reactions in our brain when a cute little animal comes and cuddles up to us that we develop a psychological connection with, an emotional connection with.
You know, it's actually like a support for sociopathism for someone that tortures animals. So, like, if you torture animals as a kid, you're
Yeah.
probably a sociopath or a psychopath.
I
It's
mean,
weird.
maybe to-
Like, I don't know. Like, I guess it's the torture, so it's like the inflicting of unnecessary pain.
it's
like
a
the
lack,
lack
of
of
capacity
empathy.
for empathy.
I don't know.
If you can't empathize with animal suffering, it's a lot easier to not empathize with human
So
suffering.
it's like if you empathize with animals, it can be irrational. But if you have no empathy, you're a psychopath.
Well, and you can take it to the other extreme where people, you see environmental terrorists who are perfectly fine bombing and destroying and causing human devastation in order to save animals. So it's like it's easier for you to empathize with suffering in the animal kingdom than with human suffering.
It's also sociopathism.
What do you say?
That also seems like sociopathism. Like the inability to feel empathy for fellow humans, and you just misplace that on the animals seems like a mental disorder. Like, shouldn't you first care for your own species before you start harming
Right.
your species to care for other species? But think about like Pocahontas, like or Avatar, like
Yeah.
the thing where like you're part of destroying this other species world, but then you become that species and you betray your species to save the other species.
Yeah.
Is that noble or rational at all?
Well, again, who says who's right or wrong? That comes back to as Eric Rand says.
I don't know if that's right or wrong, but is it
Well, I think
desirable?
where
Is
there's
that
ability to
noble? Is
Yeah,
that-
I think something with Avatar, if there was reasonable expectations between the species, they could have worked something out, but.
You have to go killing your own men.
Right, but just like on Earth, we kill people over, I don't know, an
45
imaginary,
bucks.
an imaginary
Yeah.
border, and because somebody looks different or acts different, so we can't even handle ourselves.
Well, or we justify, I mean, even if you have a capacity of empathy, a sense of morality, if you're not a psychopath, there's a difference between psychopathy and being able to justify in a sense of greater good. So you could say, I don't believe it's good that I'm killing this person, but, the sense of the greater good of allowing them to live, the suffering it can cause,
So then, like, what about the death penalty?
capital punishment. So,
Like, if it's immoral to kill animals,
yeah,
it's moral to kill people, even if they're terrible people that will continue to commit crimes. It's just you don't have a right to kill anything. Is that even beneficial to society to not kill anything?
well, so I actually had to write a paper in my ethics class my senior year on capital punishment, and from a biblical perspective. So I said, from a biblical perspective, you can't make a case against the idea of capital punishment from a moral sense. And I argue from a pragmatic sense, there is a time when it had a lot of pragmatic value. For example, the ability to truly remove somebody from a threat to society was somewhat limited. People escape prison, they escape jail a lot more commonly, and some third world countries still do. And look at El Chapo. I mean, he bribed his way out of prison at one point, and they dug a tunnel out. So they finally realized, okay, we don't have the ability within our structure of our country to incapacitate him and prevent him from escaping and doing possibly more harm. So we need to send him to America where they can. So there's that, but there's also the act of deterrent. I mean, in the old West, where they would string murderers up in the middle of town, somebody walks by, you see somebody hanging by a noose because they shot another man. There's a sense of visual deterrent of, oh my gosh, I'm not even gonna think about doing
Yeah, and
this.
also sometimes they would leave them hanging there for a while, so
Yeah.
they would rot and stuff.
That was a common practice of a visual deterrent. This is what happened. I mean, why did the Romans crucify? It wasn't because it was the most efficient. It was meant to be a public deterrent of hanging on a cross for days. See, if you even think about screwing with Rome, about committing, any sort of capital crime, this is what will happen to you. It was meant as a deterrent. I would argue that today, you look at the capacity we have theoretically, at least in our society, again, in some countries around the world, this isn't necessarily the case, to truly remove somebody from the ability to cause harm or danger to their fellow man, to inflict more suffering on society. And then also from a deterrent perspective, I don't think in most cases somebody is weighing and saying, oh, if my state had the death penalty, I wouldn't kill this person, but because it's only life in prison, I'm going to kill him and chance it. So I would make the case that from a pragmatic perspective, it is not necessarily beneficial or pragmatic, even if it could be morally justified. Because I mean, again, if
Kill
there's
people?
well, so okay,
Kill
so
criminals?
from a state sanctioned perspective, so if the police, again, if somebody's got a gun, walking into the school and a policeman draws his gun and kills him dead, nobody's going to say you had no right to take his life. They're going to say the greater
Yeah.
good, the deterrent of the harm he would have caused that child.
A lot
That's-
of people would argue with you.
Yeah, well, and some would, but I think a lot fewer. The majority would say, okay, it had to be done. It wasn't good that it had to be done, but it had to be done in order to save the lives of these children. The difference is you could say, if somebody is truly incapacitated, does not have the capacity to harm anybody anymore, is not a threat to escape and cause more harm, what's the point then of ending their life? They asked, so
But
there's.
at that point, is their life even worth anything, though?
Well, and that's some people want to die. Some people are like, they don't try to. They were like, I'd rather be executed than live in prison. They make the case that living in prison is more
That's what I was trying to say.
is
yeah.
is more
Well, but
horrific.
what about the fact of, like, there's a lot of private prisons and people are making money off of keeping people in prison rather than killing them. And then why is it that, well, but then also on the
Well-
flip side of it, it's $500,000 to lethally inject somebody.
Yeah.
Like, so we're either paying to keep them in prison through taxpayer money, or somebody's making money off of it if it's a private prison, or it costs $500,000 to, like, it seems like a lot of it's driven by money
Well,
and
and-
not necessarily what's best for society,
Is there a way to actually reintroduce them back?
like rehabilitation.
Yeah, rehabilitation that we like to think is what's going on with prison systems.
Well, and they just signed a national criminal legislation overhaul a couple months ago. Actually, it passed Congress and Trump signed it. So it was actually hailed on both sides. This idea of saying, let's work to try to reintegrate. Like if somebody smoked or sold a bag of weed, and they're spent 2 years in prison and can't get a job going forward and can't function in life because they made one dumb mistake. This isn't the best way to have a functioning society. So I think that, to your point, I think in case of capital punishment, you would make the case that what this person did is so egregious, and they're beyond the hope. Is somebody beyond the hope of rehabilitation into functional society?
Well, the question also remains is, can you actually rehabilitate criminals at all anyway? And have we actually put the effort into doing the research and like spending the money to see if it's a viable thing? Because I don't think anyone knows.
Well, it's like nobody wants to be wrong. Nobody, if you let if somebody molested a child, 20 years ago, and they're in prison or whatever, and do you want to take the chance that if you let them out, you say, it looks like they're rehabilitated, we want to try to allow them a second chance to be a functioning member of society, and then they grab another child when they get out, do you want that on your conscience? Most people always will say, no, I'll aim on the side of caution. And some people go the other extreme, where you see examples of these people should not be let out, but they are, or like they got that little time for that crime. So again, where do you draw that line? And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Mike.
You know, I think it's come up before is, you know, so we've got our criminal justice system is like, well, we've caught you, so we know you have done something.
Yeah,
But until a person's caught, like say you're a child molester there, the ones that aren't caught.
Yeah.
And so they're running around doing whatever they're
Mhm.
doing, but yet somebody who was caught and, you know, spends 20 years and gets rehabilitated, gets out, you know, they're the ones that are attacked for all of
yes.
this. Versus
Well, there's the social repercussions of it.
so
like
is
you're-
there,
So, like, can you actually ever really be truly rehabilitated when you have a record and people know you have to register? And
Yeah, and you can't get a
you can't
job,
get a
places
job.
don't rent you.
yeah,
Well,
so,
Like there are cities where they'll have like a block of apartments and all the sex offenders in the city will all live there because they're all in
Yes.
one place. So no, I'm with you, Mike, and that's a sense where, like background checks, for example. And I've talked about this before. Background checks, I'm not opposed to them. I understand why you have to have them. They give you the illusion of security.
Right.
It's the ability to say, hey, we did a background check. He came out fine, so you know you can't blame us because he did this, this, or
Right.
this. Or again, the person who 20 years ago did one stupid thing, you know, and maybe spent all those 20 years trying to rectify that, and is probably the least likely to do anything because they know how much trouble they would get if they did something again. We say, no, can't be around
Right.
children, can't hire you.
you've made your one mistake, you're done.
Exactly. I think what's much more critical is observing, you know, their pattern, you know, what have they done in their life
Mhm.
since then? And then also just having a system in place where you don't allow anybody to have that opportunity. Like for example, our church, you know, we had a meeting the other day where they were talking about, you know, the background check process for our nursery workers.
Mhm.
You know, so again, I understand why you have to have it, but our pastor had said, you know, I'd rather have somebody who maybe had something on their record but was honest, upfront about it, and says, look, I want to help out. And you look at the circumstance and you say, okay, we're not going to have this person necessarily be alone, but like we're going to have windows in each room so people can see. We're going to make sure they're not alone.
Right.
We're going to have that process versus saying, oh, you passed a background check. Okay, here's 20 kids. We're going to leave you unobserved and just assume that because you pass this check, we have nothing to worry about.
Right.
No, the check just means we didn't find anything.
There's
Or-
that
or we
too.
did,
Yeah, the check just means we didn't find anything, and there may be something we didn't find, but it's just saying, okay, well, here's,
Yeah.
we didn't find anything, so.
So you're good to go.
Yeah, well, I think applying for financial aid, if you were convicted of, I don't know, possessing or selling drugs, something like that.
Yeah.
You don't get financial aid.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how does that help this person who has decided, hey, I'm done with that,
I'm trying to
Wanna
better
move
my life.
on.
Yeah.
and yet you're not allowed to move on?
Be
So
a
it's
productive member of society.
kind of like, at what point in time can society forgive you for messing up?
Well, I don't even know if it's necessarily forgiveness, but just kind of accept that, okay, you did something. We all make mistakes. Your mistake happens to be worse according to our current set of laws versus, you know.
Well,
what
and
happened.
it's weird how we arbitrarily kind of put value. Like for instance, if I say person A killed somebody, you know, years ago, like maybe it wasn't like premeditated first degree, but you know, like they in an argument they shot somebody, they ended a human life. And person B, when they were, you know, 20 years old, maybe I'm not trying to be graphic, like there was a family member and they touched them inappropriately underage. You know, who has worse of a stigma to them? And I'm not trying to say that I'm
Right.
justifying that, but it'd be like, oh, you horrific pedophile, you know, you touched your cousin and you know, you did this versus, you know, the murderer, somebody who actually ended a human
Mhm.
life. I honestly think that the molester in that point would be more stigmatized. We have a harder time accepting that than somebody who ended a human life. And I'm not trying to justify that,
No,
but it's
yeah.
it is interesting how we arbitrarily some things are just unforgivable
Right. Well,
versus
yeah, I mean, they're, you know, part of some work on our past, homosexuality was that
yeah.
criminal act.
Yeah. And so it's like we at different points in our society we put different values on different
I
things.
mean, it's interesting, like the aversion that people have to pedophilia has been similar to other things throughout history, and that could be as like interracial relationships
Yeah.
or homosexuality or believing something different than the tribe religion,
Rock and
something
roll
like that.
music.
Yeah.
Or and all these we have these weird aversions to things where it doesn't necessarily make much sense, but then it also sort of leads to this line of reasoning that will there in a time in the future be less stigma around pedophilia?
The people are already making that case. There are sociologists who try to classify it as a disease, and they need to be treated. They need to be cared for. It's a natural inclination that any sexual attraction would be, but yet we arbitrarily draw that line and say they're the most horrific person in the world, or you know, when you're 17 years and 364 days, you know, you magically can't give consent, and then the very next day you can. I mean, I understand. You know, we have to have some sort of standard and reasoning, but it's like we do just kind of draw this arbitrary line.
Is it majority
It kind of
consensus?
yeah. I mean, to a degree, we have to recognize, I guess,
Is there
the
any moral
capacity.
absolute?
Well, I mean, back to, you know, age of consent, that's different in different states.
Well, in
That's true.
countries.
Yeah,
Or
in
the
different
age-
countries, or-
Yeah, or the age gap, you know.
Yeah,
But like, well, and again, like you
Is
know,
it any
and somebody
less
who
weird
was
for a
20.
40-year-old and a 20-year-old than it is for a 60-year-old and a 40-year-old?
Yeah,
Like it's different, right?
it's
I don't
much, or an 18-year-old and a 50, you know, a
Yeah.
60-year-old rich guy who marries like a 19-year-old. You know, well, she's 19, so she has consent, but I mean, he's taking advantage of, you know, a lack of knowledge, a lack of maybe maturity and emotional stability,
But there's not really any-
or of his money.
Yeah,
Is there anything really wrong with it, or is it just weird because we don't do it normally? Is it
that's-
just abnormal for our culture?
Yeah, you could say it's abnormal, but you know, is that worse than the 19-year-old who has consensual sex with his 16-year-old girlfriend and is
horrendous.
well, yeah, and that's the thing. Then that person's labeled as this creep and he's put on a registry and ostracized from society.
all this stuff.
Yeah, you know, so because we like to put these quick labels, so saying, oh, he had this crime, he's a sex offender.
Okay, so she's downstairs?
This is the
Yeah.
category he's in. All right, well, it's 4:05.
4
so-
o'clock, so we should probably wrap it up.
Anybody want to give these donuts a good home?
I think Daniel was.
I think the people at the house will appreciate them.
Probably.
You know,
Give
they
them to
will.
John.
But
There you go.
I think that's the same kind of thing that we have to throw on to, are we saving this animal or this animal?
Yeah.
As
Just
per
tie it all
usual,
back.
Yeah.
we have solved all of society's problems.
Hell
Thanks for
yeah.
watching.
1 week at a time.
We will see you next week.
That's what we do.
Not
best.
next week.
No.
Later in the future. Bye.